In the bitter winter of 1872, deep within the fog-choked valleys of the Arkansas Ozarks, a federal tax collector named Jeremiah Ashford stumbled upon a discovery so abhorrent that it would be immediately buried beneath layers of government classification and erased from every official record. What he found at the seemingly respectable Blood Moon Tavern would expose a flesh-harvesting operation so methodical and revolting that it shattered everything authorities believed about the boundaries of human evil and the grotesque enterprises that could thrive in America's most remote wilderness. The Blood Moon Tavern had been operating for nearly 3 decades as what appeared to be an upscale mountain inn, catering to wealthy travelers seeking luxury accommodations while crossing the treacherous Ozark passes. But beneath its veneer of hospitality lay a nightmare marketplace where human flesh was literally currency, where guests didn't simply pay for their rooms with gold coins, but where their very bodies became tender in a cannibalistic economy that had been feeding an international network of flesh-hungry aristocrats for generations. Before we plunge into this tale of systematic human harvesting and flesh commerce that was deemed too horrifying for any historical record, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our investigations into history's most suppressed secrets. And please let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with fellow truth seekers who aren't afraid to confront the stories they desperately wanted to keep buried. The Arkansas Ozarks in 1872 were a forgotten realm where civilization's laws meant nothing, a vast wilderness of primordial mountains and shadowed hollows that had remained untouched by human progress for millennia. These ancient highlands harbored secrets older than memory, where Cherokee tribes had spoken in terrified whispers of valleys cursed by Wendigo spirits and places where the very stones thirsted for human blood. The region's complete isolation made it perfect for enterprises that required absolute secrecy from the outside world. The maze-like network of limestone caves and underground rivers provided natural hiding places for activities that would be impossible in civilized areas, while the total absence of law enforcement meant that entire communities could operate according to their own twisted rules without fear of interference. The geological structure of the Ozarks was uniquely suited to the kind of operation that would eventually be discovered at Blood Moon Tavern. The honeycombed limestone bedrock contained vast cavern systems that could conceal evidence for centuries, while the region's countless underground streams offered perfect methods for disposing of human remains that would never surface again. The cultural isolation of the mountain communities was equally important to understanding how such horrors could flourish undetected. The Ozark people had developed their own insular society over generations, with ancient codes of silence and non-interference that made them naturally resistant to outside investigation or authority. The mountain folk had their own justice system, their own moral codes, and their own ways of dealing with problems that didn't involve outside authorities. This cultural independence had been forged through generations of conflict with federal agents, tax collectors, and other representatives of distant government power who were seen as unwelcome intruders in their ancestral lands. The isolation of the mountain communities was so complete that many families had lived in the same valleys for generations without ever venturing more than a few miles from their homes. This insularity created communities where everyone knew everyone else's business, but where outsiders were viewed with deep suspicion and hostility. The economic devastation following the Civil War had created additional opportunities for criminal enterprises throughout the region. Traditional social structures had completely collapsed, leaving many communities desperate for any source of income, regardless of its moral implications. This desperation made it easier for criminal organizations to recruit local accomplices and maintain the silence necessary for their operations. The war had also left the region with a large population of displaced persons, former soldiers, and refugees who had no official documentation or family connections. These individuals could disappear without anyone noticing or caring, providing a ready supply of victims for criminal enterprises that required human subjects. The aftermath of the war had created a perfect storm of conditions that enabled criminal enterprises to flourish in the region. The breakdown of traditional authority structures, the presence of large numbers of displaced and desperate people, and the complete absence of effective law enforcement created an environment where almost anything was possible. The primitive transportation infrastructure of the era made the region even more isolated and dangerous. Travel through the mountains was treacherous and unpredictable, with travelers regularly disappearing due to accidents, weather, wild animals, or bandits. This dangerous environment provided perfect cover for more sinister disappearances, as additional missing persons would attract little attention or investigation. The few roads that existed were little more than animal trails that wound through treacherous mountain passes and across unstable creek beds. During winter months, these routes became completely impassable, effectively cutting off entire communities from the outside world for months at a time. The communication systems of the era were equally primitive, with no telegraph lines reaching into the deep mountains and mail delivery being sporadic at best. This isolation meant that news of disappearances or suspicious activities could take weeks or months to reach authorities, if it reached them at all. The lack of reliable communication also meant that criminal organizations could operate with virtual impunity, knowing that their activities would not be quickly reported to outside authorities. This communication vacuum created perfect conditions for large-scale criminal enterprises that required extended periods of time to complete their operations. The Blood Moon Tavern was strategically positioned at the convergence of three major mountain passes, making it an unavoidable stopping point for wealthy travelers attempting to cross the region. The tavern had been established in 1845 by a mysterious figure, known only as Madame Evangeline Bloodmoon, who claimed to be a French aristocrat seeking to establish an exclusive retreat for European nobility visiting America. The location had been chosen with careful consideration of both strategic and practical factors. The convergence of the mountain passes created a natural bottleneck where travelers had no choice but to stop, while the surrounding terrain provided multiple escape routes and defensive positions in case of trouble. The site itself had a dark history that predated the construction of the tavern. Local Cherokee legends spoke of the area as a cursed place where ancient spirits demanded human sacrifice, and where those who violated the sacred taboos would be consumed by supernatural forces. These legends may have been based on actual historical events, as archaeological evidence suggested that the site had been used for ritualistic purposes for centuries before European settlement. The tavern itself was an architectural monstrosity that seemed to have been designed to inspire unease and foreboding. Built from black mountain stone and featuring twisted spires and grotesque gargoyles, the structure resembled a medieval fortress more than a welcoming inn. The building's dark presence dominated the surrounding landscape like a cancer growing from the mountain itself. The construction of such an elaborate and expensive structure in such a remote location would have required enormous resources and careful planning. The specialized materials and skilled craftsmen necessary for such a project would have had to be transported hundreds of miles through dangerous mountain terrain, suggesting that Madame Bloodmoon possessed both substantial wealth and powerful connections. The building materials themselves told a story of wealth and international connections. The black stone had been quarried from a specific location in the Scottish Highlands and shipped across the Atlantic at enormous expense. The stained glass windows had been crafted by master artisans in Venice, while the elaborate metalwork had been forged in the workshops of Prague. The architectural style of the building was deliberately intimidating, incorporating elements from various European traditions that were associated with death and the supernatural. The gargoyles that adorned the building's exterior were not merely decorative but served as symbols that would be recognized by members of certain secret societies and occult organizations. The tavern's exterior was decorated with elaborate stone carvings that depicted hunting scenes and mythological creatures, but closer examination revealed more disturbing imagery woven throughout the decorative elements. Hidden among the ornate designs were carved figures engaged in acts of violence and consumption, creating an atmosphere of barely concealed menace. The most disturbing of these carvings were located in areas where they would only be visible to careful observers, suggesting that they served as signals or messages to those who knew what to look for. These hidden symbols included representations of cannibalistic rituals, human sacrifice, and other activities that hinted at the tavern's true purpose. The symbolism incorporated into the building's design drew from various occult and religious traditions, creating a complex system of coded messages that could be interpreted by those with the appropriate knowledge. These symbols served both as advertisements to potential customers and as warnings to those who might pose a threat to the tavern's operations. The grounds surrounding the tavern were equally unsettling and impressive. Carefully maintained gardens featured exotic plants and flowers that seemed unnatural in the mountain environment, while winding paths led through strategically arranged groves that created secluded areas perfect for private meetings or more sinister activities. The landscaping had been designed with both aesthetic and functional considerations in mind. The exotic plants served to impress visitors with the tavern's wealth and sophistication, while the secluded groves provided privacy for activities that required concealment from casual observation. The gardens also included several structures that appeared to be decorative, but actually served more practical purposes. What appeared to be ornamental gazebos were actually observation posts that allowed the tavern staff to monitor the surrounding area for approaching visitors or potential threats. The plant selection for the gardens was not random, but had been carefully chosen to include species that had symbolic significance in various occult traditions. Many of the plants were associated with death, transformation, and supernatural power, creating a botanical code that reinforced the tavern's hidden purpose. Madame Evangeline Bloodmoon was an enigmatic figure whose true identity and background remained completely mysterious, despite decades of operation. She claimed to be descended from French nobility and spoke with a refined accent that seemed authentic to even the most sophisticated guests. Her knowledge of European customs, fine cuisine, and aristocratic protocols was extensive enough to convince visitors that she was indeed a woman of noble birth. Physical descriptions of Madame Bloodmoon were remarkably inconsistent, with witnesses describing her as everything from a beautiful young woman to an elderly matron. Her apparent age seemed to fluctuate dramatically depending on the observer, suggesting either remarkable skill at disguise or the possibility that multiple women had assumed the same identity over the years. Some guests described her as a stunning beauty, with raven black hair and piercing green eyes, while others remembered her as a distinguished older woman with silver hair and aristocratic bearing. The inconsistency of these descriptions was so extreme that investigators would later wonder if Madame Bloodmoon was actually a single individual or a role played by multiple actresses. The mystery surrounding Madame Bloodmoon's identity was further complicated by the fact that no official records of her existence could be found in any European archives. Despite her claims of noble birth and extensive knowledge of European court life, there was no documentary evidence to support her background story. What remained consistent in all accounts was Madame Bloodmoon's extraordinary ability to attract wealthy and influential guests to her remote mountain retreat. Through carefully cultivated connections and strategic word-of-mouth recommendations, she had built a clientele that included some of the most powerful figures in American and European society. Her guest list read like a who's who of international wealth and power, including railroad barons, industrial magnates, European royalty, and prominent politicians. These individuals would travel thousands of miles to experience the unique hospitality offered at Bloodmoon Tavern, often returning multiple times and bringing friends and associates with them. The Madame's network of contacts extended far beyond what would be expected for a simple innkeeper, suggesting connections to international criminal organizations or secret societies. She seemed to possess intimate knowledge of her guests' business affairs and personal secrets, information that she used both to provide exceptional service and to identify opportunities for her more sinister enterprises. Her ability to gather and use sensitive information about her guests was legendary among those who knew her. She could discuss the intimate details of European court politics with visiting nobility, debate the finer points of industrial finance with American tycoons, and share gossip about military affairs with visiting generals. This knowledge was not simply the result of casual conversation, but rather the product of a sophisticated intelligence network that gathered information about potential guests long before they arrived at the tavern. This network included agents in major cities throughout America and Europe who monitored the activities and travel plans of wealthy individuals. The intelligence-gathering operation was remarkably sophisticated for its time, utilizing techniques that would not be out of place in a modern espionage organization. The network included not only human agents, but also corrupt officials, blackmailed servants, and compromised business associates who provided information about potential targets. The tavern's reputation for exceptional cuisine and unique experiences was legendary among the wealthy elite of both America and Europe. Madame Bloodmoon employed what she claimed were master chefs trained in the finest European kitchens, who could prepare delicacies and experiences that were completely unavailable anywhere else in the world. The dining experiences at Blood Moon Tavern were unlike anything offered at any other establishment. Guests would be treated to elaborate multi-course meals, featuring what the Madame claimed were rare delicacies, imported from the most remote corners of the world. These meals were described by visitors as transformative experiences that seemed to awaken primal appetites and provide energy and vitality beyond normal human experience. The tavern's wine cellar was equally impressive, containing vintages that were supposedly unavailable anywhere else in America. The Madame claimed to have personal relationships with the finest vintners in France, Italy, and Germany, allowing her to obtain wines that were reserved exclusively for European royalty. The wine collection included not only rare and expensive vintages, but also specially prepared concoctions that contained various drugs and additives designed to enhance the dining experience. These modified wines could induce states of euphoria, reduce inhibitions, and make guests more susceptible to suggestion and manipulation. The secret to these extraordinary culinary experiences lay in the tavern's most closely guarded ingredient, human flesh that had been carefully prepared and seasoned to create dishes that satisfied both physical hunger and deeper, more primitive cravings. The tavern's kitchen operated as a sophisticated processing facility where human victims were transformed into gourmet meals for the entertainment of wealthy cannibals. The preparation of human flesh for consumption was treated as a high art form, with the tavern's chefs developing elaborate recipes and cooking techniques that had been refined over decades of experimentation. Different cuts of meat were prepared using different methods, with each preparation designed to maximize both flavor and psychological impact. The chefs had developed techniques for preparing human flesh that disguised its true nature while enhancing its unique characteristics. They had learned to combine human meat with exotic spices and preparation methods that created flavors and textures that were unlike anything guests had experienced before. The culinary techniques employed at the tavern drew from various international cooking traditions, creating a unique fusion cuisine that incorporated elements from French, Italian, German, and even exotic Asian cooking methods. This international approach helped to disguise the true nature of the meat while creating memorable dining experiences. But the true horror of Blood Moon Tavern extended far beyond simple cannibalism. The establishment operated as the central hub of an international flesh-trading network that treated human beings as livestock, to be bred, fattened, and harvested for the consumption of wealthy degenerates around the world. The operation at Blood Moon Tavern was not the work of a single individual, but rather the flagship facility of a vast criminal enterprise known as the Crimson Harvest Syndicate. This organization had established a global network of facilities dedicated to the systematic breeding, processing, and distribution of human flesh for consumption by wealthy cannibals. The Crimson Harvest Syndicate was organized as a sophisticated international business with multiple divisions specializing in different aspects of the flesh trade. The breeding division operated facilities where human beings were raised like livestock for eventual slaughter. The processing division handled the preparation and preservation of human meat. The distribution division managed the network of restaurants and private clubs where the flesh was consumed. The syndicate's organizational structure was modeled after the most successful international corporations of the era, with clear hierarchies of authority, specialized departments, and sophisticated management systems. The organization had its own accounting systems, legal departments, and even research and development divisions dedicated to improving their methods and expanding their operations. The research and development division was particularly sophisticated, employing individuals with advanced knowledge of biology, chemistry, and psychology to develop new techniques for breeding, conditioning, and processing human livestock. This division was responsible for many of the innovations that made the syndicate's operations so efficient and profitable. The syndicate's membership included some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in the world, united by their shared appetite for human flesh and their belief that consuming other human beings granted them superior strength, intelligence, and longevity. This belief system provided both motivation and justification for their systematic breeding and slaughter of human beings. The syndicate's ideology was based on a twisted interpretation of various philosophical and religious traditions that had been corrupted to justify their cannibalistic practices. They believed that human beings existed in a natural hierarchy, with the wealthy and powerful at the top having the right to consume those below them in the social order. According to their beliefs, consuming human flesh was not only morally acceptable, but actually beneficial to both the consumer and society as a whole. They argued that by consuming the weak and inferior, they were improving the human race while gaining the strength and vitality necessary to lead civilization forward. The syndicate's belief system incorporated elements from various sources, including ancient pagan religions, medieval alchemy, social Darwinism, and modern occult practices. This eclectic mix of influences created a complex ideology that could appeal to different types of individuals while providing justification for their criminal activities. The syndicate's organizational structure was remarkably sophisticated, with clear hierarchies of authority and specialized roles for different members. At the top were the board of directors, wealthy individuals who provided funding and direction for the organization's activities. Below them were the regional managers, who oversaw operations in different geographic areas. At the bottom were the workers, who handled the day-to-day operations of breeding, processing, and serving human flesh. The board of directors consisted of 12 individuals who represented the wealthiest and most powerful members of the syndicate. These individuals included European royalty, American industrial magnates, and prominent political figures from around the world. Their identities were closely guarded secrets, known only to other board members and a few trusted associates. The board members met annually at rotating locations around the world to review the syndicate's operations, approve new initiatives, and coordinate their activities. These meetings were elaborate affairs that combined business discussions with cannibalistic feasts featuring the finest human flesh that the syndicate could provide. The regional managers were responsible for overseeing syndicate operations in specific geographic areas, such as North America, Europe, Asia, and South America. Each regional manager had extensive autonomy to develop and implement strategies appropriate for their area, while also coordinating with other regions to ensure the overall success of the syndicate's operations. The regional management structure allowed the syndicate to adapt its operations to local conditions and cultural differences while maintaining overall coordination and control. This flexibility was crucial to the organization's success in operating across multiple countries and cultures. The recruitment process for the syndicate was highly selective, targeting individuals who possessed both the wealth necessary to support their operations and the psychological characteristics that would make them suitable for participation in systematic cannibalism. Potential members were subjected to extensive background investigations and psychological evaluations before being approached. The syndicate's recruitment process typically began with careful observation and assessment of potential candidates over extended periods. The organization maintained extensive files on wealthy and powerful individuals around the world, tracking their activities, interests, and psychological profiles to identify those who might be suitable for membership. The recruitment process was designed to identify individuals who possessed not only the necessary wealth and social connections, but also the psychological characteristics that would make them suitable for participation in cannibalistic activities. The syndicate looked for individuals who showed signs of sadistic tendencies, lack of empathy, and willingness to transgress social norms. The initial approach to potential recruits was always subtle and indirect, often beginning with invitations to exclusive social events or business opportunities that seemed completely legitimate. Only after extensive evaluation and gradual exposure to the syndicate's activities would potential members be approached directly about joining the organization. The recruitment process could take years to complete, with potential members being gradually exposed to increasingly extreme activities until they were fully committed to the organization. This gradual approach helped to ensure that new members would be completely loyal and unlikely to betray the syndicate's secrets. The initiation process for new members was designed to ensure absolute loyalty and secrecy through gradual exposure to increasingly extreme activities. New initiates would begin with relatively minor transgressions that could be rationalized as eccentric hobbies, but would gradually be drawn into more serious crimes, culminating in direct participation in the breeding and slaughter of human beings. The initiation process was carefully designed to exploit psychological principles of commitment and escalation, gradually increasing the initiate's investment in the organization while making it increasingly difficult to withdraw. Each step in the process was designed to be just slightly more extreme than the previous one, creating a gradual progression that prevented initiates from recognizing the full extent of what they were being asked to do. The psychological manipulation involved in the initiation process was remarkably sophisticated, utilizing techniques that would not be out of place in modern psychological warfare or cult indoctrination programs. The syndicate's leaders understood the importance of creating strong psychological bonds between members, while also ensuring their complete dependence on the organization. The psychological impact of the initiation process was profound and lasting, creating a form of traumatic bonding that made it virtually impossible for members to leave the syndicate or betray its secrets. The organization's leaders understood that once an individual had participated in the systematic breeding and slaughter of human beings, they would be forever bound to the group through fear of exposure and prosecution. The initiation rituals also served to create a sense of shared identity and purpose among the syndicate's members, reinforcing their belief in the righteousness of their cause and their superiority over ordinary human beings. These rituals drew from various religious and occult traditions, creating powerful psychological experiences that strengthened the bonds between members. The syndicate's operations were funded through a combination of membership fees, payments for services, and profits from the sale of human flesh to private collectors and other cannibalistic organizations. The financial aspects of the operation were managed with the same sophistication as any legitimate international corporation. The syndicate's financial operations were overseen by a specialized department that included some of the most skilled accountants and financial managers in the world. These individuals had developed sophisticated methods for laundering money, hiding assets, and conducting international transactions without attracting the attention of government authorities. The organization's revenue streams were diverse and substantial, including not only the direct sale of human flesh, but also related services such as hunting expeditions, breeding consultations, and specialized equipment manufacturing. The syndicate had also invested heavily in legitimate businesses that provided both cover for their operations and additional sources of income. The financial management of the syndicate was remarkably sophisticated, utilizing techniques that were far ahead of their time. The organization had developed its own banking network, complete with secure communication systems and international transfer mechanisms that allowed for the movement of large sums of money without detection. The breeding facilities operated by the syndicate were located in remote areas around the world, carefully hidden from public view and government oversight. These facilities housed hundreds of human beings who were raised from birth for the sole purpose of providing fresh meat for the syndicate's wealthy clientele. The breeding programs were based on principles similar to those used in livestock farming, but adapted for human subjects. The syndicate had developed specific breeding lines designed to optimize different characteristics such as meat quality, growth rate, and docility. These breeding programs had been refined over decades of experimentation to produce human livestock that met the exacting standards of their cannibalistic customers. The syndicate's breeding programs were overseen by individuals with extensive backgrounds in animal husbandry and genetics, who had adapted their knowledge to the breeding of human beings. These specialists had developed detailed breeding charts and genetic records that tracked the lineage and characteristics of their human livestock across multiple generations. The breeding facilities were designed to maximize both the quantity and quality of human livestock while minimizing the cost of operations. The facilities included specialized areas for breeding, birthing, nursing, and raising human offspring, with each area optimized for its specific function. The living conditions at the breeding facilities were designed to maximize the quality of the flesh while minimizing the cost of operations. The human livestock were housed in clean, climate-controlled environments and fed carefully formulated diets designed to optimize their growth and meat quality. The syndicate had developed sophisticated techniques for managing their human livestock, including psychological conditioning methods that ensured docility and compliance. The human cattle were raised from birth to accept their fate as food animals, with no knowledge of the outside world or understanding of their true purpose. The conditioning process began at birth, with human infants being separated from their mothers and raised in specialized nurseries where they were conditioned to accept their role as livestock. The conditioning process included both psychological and physical elements designed to create compliant and docile human animals. The psychological conditioning involved the use of various techniques borrowed from animal training and human psychology to create individuals who would be easy to manage and control. The human livestock were taught to respond to simple commands and to accept their handler's authority without question. The physical conditioning involved the use of various techniques to optimize the quality of the meat, including specialized diets, exercise programs, and medical treatments designed to promote healthy growth and development. The syndicate had developed detailed protocols for every aspect of human livestock management, from birth to slaughter. The slaughter and processing of the human livestock was carried out in specialized facilities that combined the efficiency of modern industrial slaughterhouses with the refinement necessary to produce gourmet quality meat. These facilities were equipped with the latest technology for humane slaughter and precise butchering. The syndicate's processing techniques had been developed over decades of experimentation to maximize both the quantity and quality of usable meat from each human carcass. Different cuts of meat were processed using different methods, with premium cuts being aged and prepared using techniques borrowed from the finest European butchers. The processing facilities included specialized areas for different stages of the operation, from initial slaughter and bleeding to aging and preservation of the meat. The syndicate had developed advanced techniques for processing human flesh that maximized both the quantity and quality of usable meat from each victim. The quality control standards for the syndicate's meat processing operations were extremely high, with detailed inspections and testing procedures designed to ensure that only the finest quality human flesh reached their customers. The organization had developed its own grading system for human meat, similar to the systems used for beef and other livestock. The distribution network operated by the syndicate included restaurants, private clubs, and catering services that served human flesh to wealthy clientele around the world. These establishments operated under the cover of legitimate businesses, with the human meat being disguised as exotic game or rare delicacies. The syndicate's distribution network was carefully designed to minimize the risk of detection while maximizing the reach and profitability of their operations. The network included both permanent establishments and mobile operations that could serve customers in remote or temporary locations. The permanent establishments included exclusive restaurants and private clubs in major cities around the world, where wealthy customers could enjoy human flesh in luxurious surroundings. These establishments were carefully designed to appear completely legitimate, with the human meat being disguised as exotic game or rare imported delicacies. The mobile operations included catering services and private chefs, who could provide human flesh for special events and private gatherings. These services were particularly popular among the syndicate's wealthiest customers, who could enjoy cannibalistic feasts in the privacy of their own homes or exclusive venues. Blood Moon Tavern served as the flagship facility for the syndicate's operations, combining breeding, processing, and serving functions in a single location. The tavern's remote location and reputation for exclusivity made it the perfect venue for the syndicate's most important clients and most elaborate cannibalistic feasts. The tavern's facilities included not only the public areas where guests were entertained, but also extensive underground chambers where the syndicate's breeding and processing operations were conducted. These underground facilities were connected to the main building through a series of hidden passages and secret entrances that allowed for the discreet movement of human livestock and processed meat. The underground facilities included specialized areas for every aspect of the syndicate's operations, from breeding and raising human livestock to slaughtering and processing them for consumption. The facilities were designed with both efficiency and secrecy in mind, allowing for large-scale operations while maintaining complete concealment from the outside world. The underground complex was a marvel of engineering and construction, featuring sophisticated ventilation systems, drainage networks, and structural supports that allowed for the creation of large spaces beneath the mountain. The construction of these facilities would have required enormous resources and the services of skilled engineers and craftsmen. The tavern's guest selection process was carefully designed to identify individuals who would be suitable either as customers for the syndicate's services or as raw material for their operations. Wealthy guests who showed interest in the tavern's more exotic offerings might be recruited as customers, while those who were deemed unsuitable might find themselves becoming ingredients in future meals. The evaluation process for new guests was conducted with such subtlety that visitors had no idea they were being assessed for potential consumption. The tavern staff would engage guests in seemingly innocent conversations designed to gather information about their backgrounds, travel plans, and personal circumstances. The staff members responsible for guest evaluation were highly trained in psychological assessment and manipulation techniques. They could quickly identify the personality traits, financial status, and social connections of new guests through careful observation and strategic questioning. The evaluation process included not only assessment of the guest's suitability as a potential victim, but also evaluation of their potential value as a customer or recruit. The syndicate was always looking for new members who could contribute to their operations, and the tavern served as an excellent recruitment venue. The evaluation process typically took several days to complete, during which time guests would be observed and assessed by multiple members of the tavern staff. The information gathered during this process would be compiled into detailed reports that would be reviewed by the syndicate's leadership before making final decisions about each guest's fate. The reports compiled on each guest were remarkably detailed and comprehensive, including not only basic biographical information, but also psychological profiles, financial assessments, and recommendations for how the individual should be handled. These reports were stored in the syndicate's archives and could be referenced for future encounters with the same individuals. Guests who were selected for consumption would be subjected to a gradual preparation process that could last for weeks or even months. This process was designed to optimize the quality of their flesh, while maintaining the pretense that they were simply enjoying an extended vacation at an exclusive mountain retreat. The preparation process began with subtle modifications to the guests' diet and exercise routine, ostensibly designed to improve their health and enjoyment of their stay. Guests would be encouraged to participate in specific activities and consume particular foods that were said to be beneficial for their well-being, but which actually served to improve the flavor and texture of their flesh. The syndicate had developed optimal conditioning regimens for different types of human livestock, taking into account factors such as age, gender, physical condition, and lifestyle. These regimens were based on decades of experimentation and were designed to produce meat that met the exacting standards of their cannibalistic clientele. The conditioning process included both dietary and exercise components designed to optimize the quality of the meat. Guests would be encouraged to follow specific meal plans and exercise routines that were presented as health and wellness programs, but which actually served to improve the flavor and texture of their flesh. The dietary modifications included the introduction of specific herbs and spices that were believed to enhance the flavor of human flesh, as well as supplements that would improve the texture and nutritional content of the meat. The syndicate had conducted extensive experiments to determine the optimal diet for different types of human livestock. The exercise programs were designed to promote muscle development and overall physical fitness while avoiding activities that might damage the quality of the meat. The programs were carefully tailored to each individual's physical condition and capabilities, ensuring that they would be both effective and enjoyable. The tavern's recreational activities served multiple purposes within the syndicate's operations. For guests who were not selected for consumption, these activities provided genuine entertainment that maintained the tavern's reputation as a premier destination. For guests who had been marked for slaughter, these activities served as opportunities for final conditioning and assessment. The recreational program included a wide variety of activities designed to appeal to different types of guests, from hunting and fishing expeditions to cultural events and social gatherings. Each activity was carefully designed to serve the syndicate's purposes while maintaining the appearance of normal hospitality. The most sinister aspect of the tavern's recreational program involved activities where guests unknowingly participated in the selection and preparation of future meals. Guests might be invited to tour the tavern's livestock facilities under the pretense of visiting exotic animal breeding programs, not realizing that they were actually viewing human beings being raised for slaughter. These tours were carefully orchestrated to appear completely legitimate, with the human livestock being presented as exotic animals or primitive peoples who were being studied for scientific purposes. The guests would be given detailed explanations of the research being conducted, never suspecting that they were actually viewing a human breeding operation. The tour guides were skilled actors who could maintain their roles while providing convincing explanations for what the guests were observing. They had been trained to answer questions and handle unexpected situations while maintaining the illusion that the facilities were legitimate scientific research operations. The tavern's hunting expeditions were particularly elaborate deceptions that served multiple purposes within the syndicate's operations. Guests would be taken into the wilderness to hunt what they believed were exotic game animals, not realizing that their prey were actually human beings who had been released into the wild for the entertainment of cannibalistic hunters. These human hunting expeditions were carefully orchestrated affairs that combined traditional hunting with ritualistic ceremony and sadistic entertainment. The human prey would be given basic survival equipment and a head start, then pursued through the wilderness by teams of hunters equipped with the finest weapons and tracking technology. The hunts were designed to provide maximum entertainment value for the syndicate's wealthy clients, with elaborate staging and careful choreography to ensure that the experience would be both thrilling and memorable. The human prey were carefully selected and prepared to provide the most challenging and exciting hunt possible. The selection of human prey for the hunting expeditions was based on various factors, including physical fitness, survival skills, and psychological characteristics. The syndicate preferred prey who would provide a challenging hunt, while also being likely to be captured alive for the final ceremonial slaughter. The hunts could last for days, with the human prey being tracked through the most remote and dangerous areas of the mountains. The syndicate's members would follow the progress of the hunt through sophisticated communication systems, placing bets on the outcome and celebrating each stage of the pursuit. The communication systems used during the hunts included both traditional methods such as signal fires and horn calls, as well as more modern technologies such as telegraph equipment and specialized optical devices. These systems allowed the syndicate's members to coordinate their activities and share information about the progress of the hunt. The hunting parties were equipped with the finest weapons and equipment available, including custom-made rifles, specialized tracking devices, and communication equipment. The syndicate spared no expense in ensuring that their hunting expeditions would be both successful and memorable. The capture and slaughter of the human prey was treated as the climax of the hunting experience, with elaborate ceremonies that preceded the preparation and consumption of the victim's flesh. These ceremonies were designed to maximize the psychological impact on both the hunters and any witnesses, creating powerful bonding experiences that strengthened the syndicate's control over its members. The ceremonial aspects of the hunts drew from various religious and cultural traditions that had been corrupted and adapted to serve the syndicate's purposes. The ceremonies included elements of ancient pagan rituals, medieval hunting traditions, and modern occult practices. The ceremonies were conducted by specially trained officiants who had extensive knowledge of various religious and occult traditions. These individuals were responsible for ensuring that the ceremonies were conducted properly and that they achieved the desired psychological impact on the participants. The processing of human victims at the tavern was carried out in sophisticated facilities that had been constructed beneath the main building. These underground chambers were equipped with all the tools and equipment necessary for the systematic slaughter and butchering of human beings. The processing facilities included specialized areas for different stages of the operation, from initial slaughter and bleeding to aging and preservation of the meat. The syndicate had developed advanced techniques for processing human flesh that maximized both the quantity and quality of usable meat from each victim. The underground facilities were designed with both efficiency and concealment in mind, featuring soundproofing, ventilation systems, and drainage that allowed for large-scale operations while maintaining complete secrecy. The facilities were connected to the main building through a series of hidden passages that allowed for the discreet movement of victims and processed meat. The slaughter process was designed to be both efficient and humane, with the syndicate's operators using techniques borrowed from the most advanced slaughterhouses of the era. The human victims were rendered unconscious before slaughter, ensuring that they experienced no pain or suffering during the process. The butchering process was carried out by skilled professionals who had been trained in the finest European meat-cutting techniques. These individuals could process a human carcass with the same precision and efficiency as the best butchers in Paris or London, producing cuts of meat that met the highest standards of quality and presentation. The butchering specialists had developed techniques specifically adapted for processing human flesh, taking into account the unique characteristics of human anatomy and physiology. They had created detailed charts and procedures for every aspect of the butchering process, ensuring consistent quality and maximum yield from each carcass. The tavern's kitchen facilities were equally sophisticated, featuring equipment and techniques that allowed the chefs to prepare human flesh in ways that enhanced its flavor, while disguising its true nature. The syndicate's culinary traditions included thousands of recipes and preparation methods that had been developed over decades of experimentation. The kitchen facilities included specialized equipment for every aspect of food preparation, from initial processing and seasoning to final cooking and presentation. The syndicate had invested heavily in the finest cooking equipment available, including custom-built ovens, specialized cutting tools, and advanced preservation systems. The chefs employed by the syndicate were among the most skilled culinary professionals in the world, recruited from the finest restaurants and royal kitchens of Europe. These individuals had been carefully selected not only for their culinary skills, but also for their willingness to participate in the syndicate's cannibalistic activities. The culinary training provided to the syndicate's chefs was extensive and comprehensive, covering not only traditional cooking techniques, but also specialized methods for preparing human flesh. The chefs were taught to create dishes that would satisfy the sophisticated palates of the syndicate's wealthy clientele, while also maximizing the psychological impact of the cannibalistic experience. The dining experiences at the tavern were elaborate affairs that combined fine cuisine with ritualistic ceremony and occult symbolism. These meals were held in specially prepared chambers where the syndicate's members would gather to consume human flesh in an atmosphere of perverted luxury and spiritual communion. The dining chambers were designed to create an atmosphere of luxury and exclusivity, with elaborate decorations, fine furnishings, and sophisticated lighting systems. The chambers were also equipped with various ceremonial objects and ritual implements that were used during the cannibalistic feasts. The meals themselves were carefully choreographed events that combined fine dining with religious ceremony and occult ritual. Each course was presented with elaborate explanations of its significance and preparation, while the consumption of human flesh was treated as a sacred act that connected the participants to ancient traditions and supernatural powers. The syndicate's beliefs about the consumption of human flesh were complex and sophisticated, drawing from various religious and philosophical traditions that had been corrupted to justify their cannibalistic practices. They believed that consuming human flesh, particularly the flesh of young and healthy individuals, would transfer the victim's life force and vitality to the consumer. These beliefs were reinforced through elaborate rituals and ceremonies that accompanied the consumption of human flesh. The syndicate had developed detailed protocols for different types of cannibalistic meals, with specific procedures for preparing and consuming different parts of the human body. The syndicate's ideology included elements borrowed from ancient pagan religions, medieval alchemy, and modern occult practices. The organization had developed its own unique mythology and belief system that provided both motivation and justification for their systematic breeding and consumption of human beings. The disposal of evidence from the tavern's operations was handled with the same systematic precision that characterized every other aspect of their enterprise. The tavern was equipped with sophisticated facilities for eliminating all traces of their victims, including acid baths for dissolving organic material and high-temperature furnaces for cremating bones and other hard tissues. The evidence disposal systems were designed to be both efficient and thorough, capable of completely eliminating all traces of human remains within hours of processing. The systems included multiple backup methods for disposing of evidence, ensuring that even if one method failed, there would be no physical traces left behind to incriminate the organization. The syndicate had also developed relationships with local scavengers and predators that could be used to dispose of organic waste. The Ozark Mountains were home to numerous species of large carnivores that could be relied upon to consume any remains that were left in designated areas of the wilderness. The cave systems beneath the tavern provided additional opportunities for evidence disposal, with numerous deep shafts and underground rivers that could carry remains far from the scene of the crimes. The syndicate had mapped these cave systems extensively and had identified specific locations that were ideal for disposing of different types of evidence. The financial aspects of the syndicate's operations were managed with the same sophistication as any legitimate international corporation. The wealth generated through their activities was used to fund expansion of their operations and to ensure the continued cooperation of corrupt officials and other accomplices. The syndicate had established sophisticated money laundering operations that allowed them to convert the profits from their criminal activities into legitimate investments and assets. These financial networks extended throughout the United States and internationally, allowing the syndicate to operate on a truly global scale. The organization's financial operations included not only the management of their criminal proceeds, but also the funding of legitimate businesses that provided cover for their activities. The syndicate had invested heavily in transportation companies, agricultural operations, and other businesses that could facilitate their operations while generating additional revenue. The international scope of the syndicate's operations was truly staggering, with similar facilities operating in Europe, Asia, South America, and Africa. These facilities were connected through a sophisticated communication and transportation network that allowed for the coordination of activities and the exchange of human livestock and resources. The syndicate's international network included some of the most powerful and influential individuals in the world, creating a web of corruption and complicity that extended to the highest levels of government and society in multiple countries. The organization's international operations were coordinated through a sophisticated communication system that included both traditional methods such as coded letters and more modern technologies such as telegraph networks. The syndicate had also established its own transportation network that could move people and goods across international boundaries without detection. The systematic nature of the syndicate's operations and the extent of their influence might have allowed them to continue indefinitely, if not for a series of coincidences and mistakes that brought their activities to the attention of federal tax collector Jeremiah Ashford in the winter of 1872. Ashford was a meticulous government official who had been assigned to investigate tax irregularities in the Arkansas Territory. His investigation into unreported income and suspicious financial transactions had led him to focus on Blood Moon Tavern as a potential source of tax evasion. Ashford's background as a former Union Army quartermaster had given him extensive experience in financial investigations and supply chain management. His methodical approach and attention to detail made him uniquely qualified to uncover irregularities in the tavern's operations, even when those irregularities concealed far more sinister activities. The tax collector's investigation began with a routine analysis of the tavern's reported income and expenses. He quickly discovered that the establishment was generating far more revenue than could be accounted for by its legitimate operations, while also incurring expenses that seemed completely unrelated to running an inn. Ashford's financial analysis revealed numerous suspicious transactions that suggested the tavern was involved in some form of illegal commerce. The pattern of payments and receipts indicated a sophisticated operation that was generating substantial profits from undisclosed activities. The tax collector's attempts to gather information about the tavern's operations were met with evasion and hostility from both the staff and local authorities. This resistance only strengthened his suspicions that the tavern was hiding significant criminal activity. Ashford decided to conduct a covert investigation of the tavern by posing as a wealthy businessman seeking investment opportunities in the region. This decision proved to be both crucial to uncovering the truth about the syndicate's activities and extremely dangerous to his personal safety. The tax collector's cover story was carefully crafted to make him an attractive target for the syndicate's operations. He presented himself as a wealthy industrialist with substantial assets and connections to European markets, suggesting that he might be either a valuable customer or a profitable victim. Ashford's training and experience allowed him to maintain his cover while conducting a detailed investigation of the tavern's operations. He was able to observe and document numerous suspicious activities that confirmed his suspicions about the establishment's true nature. During his stay at the tavern, Ashford discovered evidence of the syndicate's cannibalistic activities, including human remains in the tavern's processing facilities, specialized equipment for slaughtering and butchering human beings, and documentation of the syndicate's operations and membership. The tax collector's most shocking discovery came when he gained access to the underground chambers beneath the tavern, where he witnessed firsthand the syndicate's human breeding and slaughter operations. The scenes he observed were so horrifying that they would haunt him for the rest of his life. Ashford's investigation revealed that the Crimson Harvest Syndicate had been operating for over 2 decades and had been responsible for the systematic breeding, slaughter, and consumption of thousands of human beings. The syndicate's records documented their activities in meticulous detail, providing evidence of crimes against humanity on an unprecedented scale. The tax collector realized that he was in mortal danger and needed to escape from the tavern before his true identity was discovered. However, he also understood that he had a responsibility to gather as much evidence as possible to ensure that the syndicate's crimes could be exposed and its members brought to justice. Ashford's escape from Blood Moon Tavern was a harrowing ordeal that required all of his skills and experience as a former military officer. He was forced to flee through the mountain wilderness while being pursued by syndicate members who were determined to prevent him from exposing their activities. The tax collector's knowledge of wilderness survival and his experience in military logistics proved crucial to his survival during the escape. He was able to use the rugged terrain and his understanding of supply lines and communication networks to stay ahead of his pursuers and eventually reach safety. When Ashford finally reached federal authorities and attempted to report his discoveries, he encountered a conspiracy of silence and corruption that extended to the highest levels of government. Many of the officials he contacted were either members of the syndicate themselves or were compromised through blackmail or bribery. The tax collector's attempts to expose the syndicate's activities were met with threats, intimidation, and legal challenges that prevented him from revealing the truth about their operations. Powerful interests worked systematically to suppress his findings and to discredit him both professionally and personally. Despite these obstacles, Ashford managed to compile a detailed report of his discoveries and to hide copies of the evidence he had gathered in secure locations. These documents would remain hidden for decades, serving as the only record of the syndicate's crimes. The suppression of Ashford's investigation was so thorough and effective that virtually no trace of the syndicate's activities remained in the public record. The case was classified at the highest levels of government secrecy and was removed from all historical accounts of the period. The few officials who had knowledge of the case were sworn to absolute secrecy and were monitored continuously to ensure their continued silence. Several individuals who attempted to reveal information about the syndicate mysteriously disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances. The cover-up of the Blood Moon Tavern case reflected the government's belief that some truths were too horrifying for public consumption and that the revelation of systematic human breeding and cannibalism would cause complete social collapse and international diplomatic catastrophe. The classification of the case also reflected concerns about the potential for copycat crimes and the spread of cannibalistic practices to other parts of the world. Officials feared that public knowledge of the syndicate's activities might inspire similar organizations or lead to widespread vigilante violence. The international implications of the case were considered too dangerous to risk exposure, as the revelation of the syndicate's global network would have implicated prominent figures from multiple countries in systematic crimes against humanity. The diplomatic consequences of such revelations were deemed unacceptable. The suppression of the case was facilitated by the limited communication capabilities of the 1870s, which made it possible to control information in ways that would be impossible in the modern era. The lack of mass media and international communication networks meant that even leaked information would have limited reach and impact. The classification of the Blood Moon Tavern case remained in effect for over a century, with successive generations of government officials maintaining the secrecy surrounding the syndicate's activities. The case was periodically reviewed for possible declassification, but each review concluded that the information remained too sensitive for public release. The existence of the Crimson Harvest Syndicate and their systematic breeding and consumption of human beings remained one of the most closely guarded secrets in world history, known only to a small number of high-ranking officials who had been cleared for access to the most sensitive classified information. The few documents that survived the cover-up were stored in the most secure government archives, accessible only to individuals with the highest levels of security clearance and a demonstrated need to know. Even these documents were heavily redacted and contained only fragmentary information about the syndicate's activities. The suppression of the Blood Moon Tavern case had lasting effects on international law enforcement and intelligence operations, establishing precedents for the classification of information deemed too sensitive for public consumption. The case became a template for future cover-ups and helped establish the legal frameworks used to suppress sensitive government information. The legacy of the Crimson Harvest Syndicate extended far beyond their immediate crimes, influencing the development of international criminal organizations and human trafficking networks throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The syndicate's methods and organizational structure were studied by government researchers and used to develop countermeasures against similar groups. The breeding and conditioning techniques developed by the syndicate were of particular interest to government researchers, who recognized their potential applications in military and intelligence operations. Some of these techniques were later incorporated into government programs for psychological warfare and population control. The financial networks established by the syndicate also had lasting effects on international banking and commerce, with some of the corrupt institutions and individuals who had facilitated the syndicate's operations continuing to function long after the organization itself had been destroyed. The international connections established by the Crimson Harvest Syndicate had significant implications for global security and law enforcement, providing intelligence about international criminal networks and demonstrating the need for international cooperation in combating organized crime. The cover-up of the Blood Moon Tavern case also had important implications for the development of government secrecy and classification systems, demonstrating both the potential benefits and significant costs of suppressing information about criminal activities. The ethical questions raised by the classification of the case continue to be debated by historians and human rights advocates who argue that the public has a right to know about crimes against humanity, even when those crimes are particularly disturbing or horrifying. The debate over the Blood Moon Tavern case reflects broader questions about the balance between national security and public transparency, and about the circumstances under which governments are justified in suppressing information about systematic human rights violations. The story of the Crimson Harvest Syndicate and their systematic breeding and consumption of human beings serves as a reminder of the capacity for ultimate evil that exists within human nature and the importance of remaining vigilant against organizations that would treat human beings as livestock. The case also demonstrates the importance of thorough and persistent investigation in uncovering criminal activities, even when those activities are carefully concealed and protected by powerful interests. Jeremiah Ashford's courage and dedication in pursuing the truth ultimately led to the exposure of one of the most horrifying criminal organizations in human history. The suppression of information about the case reflects the complex challenges that governments face in balancing public safety and security against principles of transparency and human rights. While the decision to classify the Blood Moon Tavern case may have been justified by extraordinary circumstances, it raises fundamental questions about accountability and justice. The legacy of the Crimson Harvest Syndicate continues to influence our understanding of organized crime, human trafficking, and the potential for systematic evil to flourish in isolated communities. The case serves as the ultimate cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of maintaining strong institutions to protect human dignity. As we reflect on the horrifying story of Blood Moon Tavern and the cannibalistic syndicate that operated there, we are reminded of the importance of remaining vigilant against those who would reduce human beings to mere commodities for their own twisted appetites. The victims of the Crimson Harvest Syndicate deserve to be remembered not just as statistics in classified government files, but as human beings whose lives were stolen and whose suffering serves as a warning about the ultimate depths of human evil. In the end, the Macabre Inn, where guests paid in flesh, represents the most disturbing chapter in the secret history of human cruelty, a story so horrifying that it was deemed too dangerous for any public record and buried forever in the deepest vaults of government secrecy.